And this type of rig applies to anything that you want to be able to adjust. So for example, a pen, I want it to be held in the hand, and I want to be able to animate it as I move the hand around. I don't want the hand to just hold this pen and then have it locked in place, and that's it. Now, there's many different ways of doing it, but in this demo, I'm going to be assuming that we want the pen to be attached to the hand. So this is going to be very good for when you have a performance and the characters doing these big, broad gestures, or if you're doing a character who's writing something and you want the pen to flip in their hand like this. We want the hand to kind of lead, just because it's going to be a little bit easier to get the big, broad motions and then just have essentially layer all the pen motions over top of that. So that's going to be the assumption for this. Depending on the shot, sometimes you'll want to have the hand follow the baton or the pen so that you can, let's say, draw something out. So let's say if you've ever seen like the Mickey Mouse channel, or the Disney channel, and they do the writing out the Mickey Mouse head in space, if you actually trace it, they never actually do it. They just kind of squiggle it in the air. But if we were animating that, I would want to be able to track that tip of the wand that they're using, animate that, get the perfect path, and just have the hand follow along. With that, I would switch it up. But for this shot, we want the pen or the baton to follow the hand. So that's going to be the setup we're using here. So to do this, let's first, and make sure my tablet is working here. There we go. I'm just going to create a very basic baton rig. Now, the way I'm going to do this first is I'm going to bring in a character. I believe in your shot, you're using Overlord. So I'm going to bring him in. We don't usually demo him, so there's a good chance to get to see him. So let that reference in. So the reason I'm bringing in a rig first is I want the baton to fit his hand. That's the big thing. I don't want to rig up and create a prop only to have it like super tiny and just a toothpick in his hand, or be a tree trunk, something like that. So let's just create the basic baton. Now for this, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I'm just going to take this. Let's make it a little longer. How long? Meh. Something around there feels pretty good. Maybe a little thinner. And then I'm just going to take the vertices on the top here and thin them out. Maybe that one as well, just a little bit. So we get that taper. There we go. We've got a baton. So I'm just going to call this baton. And then I always like to add _geo for the geometry, just so I know that it's geometry. And I'm going to put this back into the center of the world here. It's going to be easier to rig and set up with this object in the center of the world first before we start moving things around. So we've got the geometry, but we've still got some history to this. We've got all of the elements that created this cylinder in the first place, and we've also got these weird scale attributes. Whenever you're modeling a prop, we don't want to have this. It can start getting in the way of things. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to go to Modify, Freeze Transformations. This will reset all the transformations and basically make it so that this is the default form. There's no scale, there's no translates. This is its default position. I'm also going to go to Edit, Delete by Type History. That just makes sure that there's no history on there. This is the object as is. It's not a cylinder that was turned into a baton. It is just this. And once again, it just helps to avoid any potential issues down the road. So we've got our basic geometry here, but I never like to animate geometry if I can avoid it. I always like to animate a control curve, just like what we have on a rig. So this is a control curve. I select that. I can move the foot. I'm not selecting the foot geometry. Animating the geometry itself, there's a whole slew of issues with that, especially when you're working in a pipeline environment. I'm not going to go in that right now, but it's not something I like to do if I can avoid it. So let's make a basic rig. To do that, I'm just going to go to Create, NURBS Primitive, Circle, right here. And this is going to act as my control curve. Now, to set up the rig that we need, we just need 2 control curves. So I'm going to have 1, then duplicate it, and then 2 right there. So I'm going to select these. Once again, go to Modify, Freeze Transformations once I've got them the size I want, and then Edit, Delete by Type, History. Now, in this case, I'm just leaving them in the center. I'll be able to adjust these wherever I want later on afterwards. But let's name these. So we're going to have the baton underscore control. There we go. And then we're going to have the baton, not 2 T's, baton, I can spell. And then this is going to be offset. So this is going to be the offset control. And essentially, this is going to be the thing that allows me to move the pivot point. So we've got these 2 controls right here. Now, to rig this up, it's going to be super simple. I just take the offset and I'm going to parent it under the baton control right here. So we have control, then offset. I did this by middle mouse dragging one object into the other. You can also do this by selecting the child. So in this case, the offset, then the parent, which is going to be the control here. So this followed by that, going to edit parent right here. So what this means is I now can move the main control around. Everything else moves together, but the offset can still move on its own right here, like so. With that, we now need to attach the baton to this. Now, there's a few different ways you could do this. Some people, they'll just do it simply and take the baton, parent that to the offset control, and there we go. Nice and easy. So now that follows along, and the offset allows me to adjust this right here. And now when I move my main control, you can see that the baton is pivoting from the tip right there. Or if I take the offset, let's move that back up, whoop, right there. Now the baton is moving from the base. There we go, an animatable pivot point. Nice. Now, I could do it this way. I am not a fan of this though. I do not like this. Anytime I see a prop that has this setup, it just, a little bit of me dies inside. Just a little bit. Honestly, I'm just being picky. This is just my brain not liking certain things. When I select a control, I do not like it when the geometry highlights. So you can see here, our baton is gray. Maybe I have some texture on it. Oh, it looks nice and pretty. I select the control, it highlights bright green. I don't like that. I want it to be like a rig. If I select this foot control, the foot doesn't turn green. I just selected the control and the foot stays the same, just like that. So the way we can do this is just don't parent the geometry. The geometry doesn't need to be animated. Once again, I do not animate the geometry as much as I can. So if I can lock this off, hey, I don't mind. So instead of parenting it to the other controllers, I'm going to constrain it to the controllers. So to do this, I'm just going to take my offset right there, then select the geometry right here, go to constrain, and I'm going to do a parent constraint. A parent constraint is a constraint that mimics parenting, so you get the same functionality. So if I do this, now I'll get the exact same results. I can move that around. I can use my offset here to change where my pivot point is, but you can see that the baton stays gray. It doesn't get selected because it's not part of that hierarchy anymore. So now I get this much cleaner look that's much easier to animate, at least for me, and I'm not getting distracted and having all of these weird highlights come up. So this is our basic rig right here. Done. I now have a baton that I can put in the character's hand right here. Maybe I made it a little small, but yeah, that's fine. So I can place this in the character's hand, and if I want him to hold it maybe further down along the base, maybe like 2/3 of the way down, I can just use my offset control, move that right there. Now I have that baton. It can rotate from that point right there. Perfect. Now, with that, we need to put it in the character's hand. if I just constrain this right now, I'm going to lose everything that I just did. So I see this a lot of times. Animators will work really hard, get this really nice prop to put in the character's hand, and then they're going to take that prop and just constrain it to the hand. Constrain, parent, done. What you've just done is you've lost your ability to animate that prop. If I move this now and then move the hand, you see it just snaps right back because it has been constrained. It's been locked into place. We don't want that. We want the ability to be able to animate this in the hand and have it follow the hand. I should be able to make it move through the fingers like I'm doing with the pen here, and it just moves with the hand. It shouldn't just be locked in place and then it's stuck there like it was super glued. To do this, all we need is what I typically call a buffer. Usually I'll use locators for this, but you can use any object, honestly. It's essentially something that we can use to create a constraint and a parent relationship together instead of just a straight constraint. So in this case, I'm going to use a locator just because I've done that a lot on stream. So I want to just keep that consistency. But I usually use groups for this type of situation just because it's cleaner visually. But we don't have to dive too much into that. It's really the exact same thing. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to create locator, and the exact position of this doesn't matter. I'm just going to move it up here, and I'm just going to call it constraint buffer right there. So what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to have this object constrained to the wrist, and then the wand parented to this object. So let's show how this works. So I'm going to have the wand parented to the locator. I'm just going to middle mouse drag that, boop, into the constraint buffer right there. Then I'm going to take the wrist, constrain the locator to that. So wrist, then locator, constrain, parent. What does that do? Well, now when I rotate the wrist, the locator moves with it. And because the baton is parented to the locator, it follows along. There we go. So now I get that following along, and I can still animate this however I want. So I can adjust this maybe way over here, and you'll notice, there you go, still works. Beautiful, perfect, done. Now this is the most basic setup. If you have a more complex prop, you won't be able to do a straight parent like this. It's just not going to work. You're going to have to add an extra layer to this. But for this demo, we're just going to keep it like this. It's just nice and simple. But there is one thing that you want to watch out for. You want to watch out what you constrain, or let me put it this way, how you constrain it to the hand. What I did here is I constrained this baton to the wrist control, the FK wrist control right here. Now what that means is that as I move the FK wrist, the baton moves along. Great, yay, everything works fine. But what happens if I have to switch it to IK? So I'm going to take my hand here and switch it to IK, boop, like so. Suddenly, the baton doesn't follow anymore, because it is still following the FK control. We do not want to do that. This is going to lead to a lot of nightmares of fighting our animations and trying to connect things. It's just going to be a pain. And you're going to have two versions of the prop or two different constraints. Bleh, no. So instead, I'm not going to constrain it to the actual wrist control here. What I'm going to do, let's make sure I delete that. There we go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to constrain the object to the arm control. Most rigs have these. It should usually be a control at the end of the fingers, or it's somewhere around the hand, sometimes like right over here on the pinky side of the hand. And the arm control is a control that allows you to essentially lock something to the joint of the wrist, not to the FK or IK control. So if I do this here, I'll select the arm control, then the locator here, constrain parent. You'll notice that, hey, I get the exact same results. It follows the wrist, done. If I switch to IK, hey, it still follows the wrist, done. Yay, there we go. Now, can you parent it to a finger control? Yes, you can. The problem with that is if you constrain it to a finger control and then you rotate the finger. So let's kind of do this here. Let's delete that. Let's say I want to constrain it to a finger control. So finger, then this, constrain parent. As I animate this finger, I'm going to get extra motion on that object. So I'm animating on the wrist here, and then, ooh, the hand has to tighten up. Oops. Now it's moving with the finger. You could maybe connect it to a metacarpal control. That's the palm controls right here if you have them. But once again, if you animate that, which ideally you should be animating them, you're going to get some distortion in there. So look for the arm control on the rig. Sometimes they're called something different, but essentially it should be the pivot point in the wrist here. If you do not have an arm control, the next best thing to do is to constrain it directly to a joint in the hand or in the arm. So let's say we don't have that arm control. What I would want to do is select the root control here on this rig. I'm going to turn on skeleton visibility, and that allows me to see the actual joints in the character right here. I'm going to find the wrist joint right there, and then constrain the locator, in my case, to that. So I'm going to get the exact same results, and I think I got the wrong joint. Make sure you get the right one. That always helps. So which one am I looking for? This one right here for this rig. So constrain parent. There we go. So now that's going to follow along, whether it's an IK or FK, and I'm good. So I would much rather go straight to the joint than to any finger control, because once again, if you start animating the hand and the fingers like you should, that's the whole reason we're doing this, is so that we can get all of this control and fine tuning. I do not want to have the index finger, like if I'm holding the pen like this and I move the index finger, I don't want to have this stuck and always have to counter animate it back, especially if it's over here. I do not want it to be affected by this. I just want to follow the overall hand motion. So that's the basic setup. Honestly, for a setup like this, it's really just getting that offset control within the pen, baton, whatever it is. That's going to be huge. And you can technically go even further, add extra layers to this to make it more complex. But this is the setup at its most simple and will give you really solid animation possibilities. And do I have the demo that I did here? Let me see if I can find. Let's see. For some reason, my computer doesn't want to open up other folders. Okay, there we go. Windows being, there we go. So let me find a demo that I animated here a while back. Twitch demos. And the reason I want to show this is the setup that I just did today is exactly the setup, or pretty darn close. It's been a while. Is the same setup that I used for this demo. So you'll see the possibilities that you can do. Twitch demos. One day I'm going to organize my files. It will not be this day. That's going to be in the future. Future me will do it. So this is a pen flip demo that I had animated on stream. So there we have it. And all of this was animated with the exact same workflow that I showed you today. That same constraint setup. It's just a pen prop with those two rings, the main control and the offset control. And then all of that parented to the wrist so that it follows along. And I can just do all of that and change the pivot point. So you can see that it's pivoting from the tip to the middle to the end and then back all through there, nice and easy. So you don't have to go that much more complex to get really detailed animation. If you wanted to, you can definitely do more complex, especially if you're going to have the switch off or do something even more dynamic, but it's a good place